I'm Dan Mercedes, and this is Orion Doctrine. Today we're examining why audit logs are not enforcement and what immutable receipts actually prove. Most systems treat audit logs as sufficient proof of control. This is a structural fallacy. Logs are post hoc and observational. They record events after state mutation has already occurred. What that means in practice is that your governance layer is watching, not constraining. It's looking at what happened, not what is allowed to happen. Relying on logs assumes unauthorized actions may execute before intervention. That latency window is systemic risk. Logs are observational artifacts. They do not constrain execution. Governance evaluated after execution is telemetry, and telemetry is not enforcement. Immutable receipts replace implicit trust with deterministic, cryptographic attestation. They shift the proof from "we saw it" to "we authorized it" or "we blocked it, and here's the cryptographic artifact that proves it." Let me slow that down and walk through the structural differences. To understand deterministic governance, we need to clarify what separates observing an action from proving an enforcement. Audit logs are asynchronous, observational, and sometimes append-only records. They are decoupled from the enforcement boundary. The action completes, and then the log entry is written. There's a temporal gap. In that gap, you have no guarantee. The log might fail to write. The log might be tampered with later. The log might miss context about what policy was evaluated, or whether any policy was evaluated at all. Immutable receipts, by contrast, are generated synchronously and are cryptographically chained. They are inextricably tied to the evaluated policy version and the explicit cryptographic authorization required for execution. The defining principle is this: if a mutation can complete without a receipt, it can complete without governance. Because the system requires synchronous receipt generation before finalizing the mutation, no action can ever occur off the books. This is not observability. This is constraint. Here's where it gets interesting. The receipt lifecycle functions as a synchronous enforcement gate within the execution substrate. Let me walk through the sequence. First, intent arrival. An agent passes a structured intent payload to an internal RPC stub. The request has not yet been routed. It's isolated. Second, policy evaluation. The validation engine takes that request payload and evaluates it against compiled policy constraints in memory. This happens in process. No external hops, no latency windows where the request could slip through. Third, receipt creation. Every material action, whether approved or denied, generates a receipt, not just the successful ones. The denials are recorded too. That's critical. If you only log what succeeded, you're blind to what was attempted. Fourth, hash chaining. The receipt is written to an append-only ledger using cryptographic hash chaining. Each receipt references the hash of the previous receipt. You cannot retroactively insert or alter a receipt without breaking the chain. Fifth, routing established. Only after the receipt is successfully generated and recorded is the execution routed to its destination. If the receipt cannot be written to the ledger, the transaction is rolled back and execution halts. This is not a best effort log. This is a structural gate. This sequence is structurally enforced. The system cannot proceed without it. The enforcement is not advisory. It is mechanical. Now, what does this architecture provide? Absolute non-repudiation. To achieve this, the system relies on tamper evidence storage and comprehensive state mutation journaling. The receipt journals the state mutation by including the agent's exact request payload, the specific policy version evaluated, the cryptographic signatures of both, and the timestamp. By anchoring receipts to an append-only, hash-chained ledger, Merkle trees are the canonical example. The record becomes tamper-evident. You can prove what was evaluated, when it was evaluated, and what decision was made. Think about what that actually means. In a deterministic system, enforcement is not inferred. It is cryptographically attested. Where does enforcement occur? Within the synchronous transaction loop prior to external transmission. What happens on failure? If the receipt cannot be written to the ledger, the transaction is rolled back and execution halts. What artifact proves enforcement? The chained, cryptographically signed block in the immutable ledger serves as proof for approved transactions. For a denied request, enforcement is attested by the cryptographic hash of the evaluated payload and policy state. You have proof of what was blocked, not just what was allowed. I can already hear the objection. This sounds like over-engineering. Do we really need cryptographic receipts for every action? Most systems work fine with logs. Why introduce this complexity? Here's the counterpoint. Most systems work fine until they don't. The question is not whether you need receipts for routine operations. The question is whether you can prove, under audit or incident response, that governance was actually enforced. Logs tell you what happened. Receipts prove what was allowed. That distinction matters when trust is contested. If execution is not cryptographically recorded at the moment of constraint evaluation, it is not governed. It is merely observed. Immutable receipts close the enforcement gap. They eliminate the latency window between action and audit. They provide tamper-evident proof of policy application. This is not optional infrastructure for high-trust environments. This is the foundation of deterministic governance.